Welcome to the Region of Solutions podcast, where we give you the insider's take on the impactful work and initiatives being undertaken at ESCAP. I'm Kavita Sukanandan. So cities across Asia and the Pacific in recent decades have undergone extraordinary transformation and economic growth. The region is home to 54% of the world's urban population, and this is projected to increase from the current 2.5 billion urban dwellers to 3.5 billion in 2050. On the flip side, many cities still lag in infrastructure, employment, and basic services to keep up with this rapid urbanization. Cities are also experiencing widening inequalities, which stunt equitable growth and lead to social exclusions. Livable and sustainable cities are going to be paramount for the region's future growth and sustainability. To take this conversation forward and share some of the major legwork that is being done in our urban centers, we have with us today Norliza Hashim, CEO of Urbanice Malaysia, and Omar Siddique from the Urban Development section of ESCAP. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey, Norliza? Where did the passion for urban development come from?
Well, I'm a town planner by profession, and I think that's a big help and a good start to how I am in this urban development journey. Over the last 38 years, actually, I opened my own office about when I was at the age of 32. So I started very young. And at the time when I started my profession, also Malaysia was going through a very fast growth rate, and we were doing a lot of new transformation project in the country. Then I started working with communities, with the professional bodies that I'm attached to, and I got deeper into understanding about the issues that's related to development or urban growth itself. Now I'm helming the Urbanice Malaysia, which is very focused on sustainable cities. My early years as a town planner has actually helped me a lot.
Interesting journey, Norliza. And Omar, what about you and your journey in this field? How did you get to the UN?
My personal story also started out quite young. I was actually living in Fiji as a teenager. There was a coup d'etat on May 19th, 2000. At that time, former Secretary General Kofi Annan sent Sergio de Mello to support the reconciliation process. I met him and he really got me inspired to work for the UN, but he also really brought home this idea of action and ownership of multilateralism, and these type of global frameworks need to be owned by all levels and all actors. And that really inspired me to work in the UN. After I finished graduate school in New York, my first job at UNDP's Regional Bureau for Asia Pacific, this is back in 2004, was to write a report on best practices to scale up localizing MDGs. I still look back at that report, actually, and a lot of the things that we are recommending back in 2005 are still very salient today, just different acronym, but also quite a lot of things have changed as well. Working on this topic of localizing SDGs, it almost feels like coming home.
Wow, that's a very interesting career trajectory. And look at where both of you are now, leading change through our cities and communities. So, one of the common questions we ask all our guests on every episode is, what solutions are you working on for the region?
At the Urban Development section in ESCAP, we are these believers in terms of the power of local and regional policy making. While we needed national governments to agree on the SDGs and they have to go to the UN every year to say where they stand, we really believe implementation of these ambitious goals need to be done by every level of government and every actor in society. But one of the reasons I really like working on urban development is that because you get to really interface a lot with communities. So we work a lot with organized communities, whether that's those living in informal settlements and also those working in the informal economy. Is what I like about my job in terms of the solutions I provide is that working with mayors especially are naturally solution oriented, because this is where the rubber hits the road for all of these national and international development frameworks and policies. It's the cities and the mayors leading them that really are at the forefront of making these a reality for citizens, whether that's through enhanced service provision, more affordable housing, and more livable and accessible communities overall.
A lot of the issues are at the ground, and we find that this is the best opportunity on how a national agency can actually go down to the ground and bring the policies down, and how do we make sure that we can implement the policies. So it started with a very simple and clear objective. However, when we get to the ground and then we understand that the stakeholders are much larger than what we anticipate, not just the local government, which is directly under our ministry, there are other agencies involved, and there's also the community. A lot of the work today we do, we try to bring these stakeholders together and providing our stakeholders with new knowledge all the time, so that they become more empowered. In the past, we always assume it's the role of the national government, but we all understand that localization is very much about a bottom-up approach. However, local players are not empowered and they do need the guidance on how to actually make their role more effective, not just as a voice, but also taking part in the actions. Slowly, the work that we do through not only programs like Malaysia Urban Forum, but also through some small projects that we do at the community level, we are testing our own solution. For example, we're testing some of the national policies with regards to community empowerment. We build small community hubs and small community spaces, and then we empower them to take care of the spaces. Difficult also because sometimes they are so used to someone cleaning it up, someone repairing it, they just are using it. And along this way, we find that there are so many other players also at the ground, NGOs, CSOs, and it's very important that as a national agency that we work on a more collaborative manner.
What I'm hearing from both of you is really that our communities are at the forefront of sustainable development, and this is where we need to address some of the challenges or build capacities, empower them more in this quest to achieving the SDGs. But is localizing global agendas like the SDGs a new concept for cities in the region?
Certainly not. Subnational and local governments are not new to this idea of localizing. In fact, most of the local government representatives that I meet or mayors that I meet, they don't wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to implement the SDGs. They wake up in the morning and say, you know what, I'm going to fix the affordable housing problem today, or I'm going to fix the air quality issue, or I'm going to renovate that park to make it more accessible for people with disabilities. And many of the things that they are doing are inherently linked to the goals, but they may not articulate it as such. Really, this localization movement, it started in earnest at the first Rio conference in 1992. We had Agenda 21. And what was really interesting was there was a lot of pushback on this aspect from developing countries, because at this time, there was this kind of false dichotomy between brown sector and green sector, and cities were kind of seen as polluting and Western creations. But after that conference, we had what we called local Agenda 21 plans, and there were many of these developed by local and subnational governments in the region. We then had the MDG era, where we had Target 11 under MDG 7, which was to improve the lives of 100 million slum dwellers by 2020. So there was a lot of coalescing around that particular target, but the MDGs was more about basic services and only applied to, of course, developing countries and developing cities. Now I see a complete, almost revolution where these calls for sustainability in a comprehensive sense are coming from cities as part of SDG 11, but also the broader SDGs. We know that over 65% of the goals need to be met in or by local areas.
Cities today are more prepared thanks to the LA21 program. And similarly, in Malaysia, it started in 1990. We piloted it in 5 cities. And today, all the cities have a local Agenda 21 program. So when we came on board with the localization of the LDGs program, it was not something totally alien. So that was why we localized the whole process of the SDG reporting so that they do not have to feel that it's something totally new. But now we want them to have a more focus with regards to the targets, with regards to the outcomes that they can achieve from the efforts that they are making. They are much, much luckier because when we started to realize economically where 70% of our GDP actually comes from the urban area. Recognizing that makes us want to reinvest in our cities in a more sustainable manner.
Are there any other examples of solutions or good practices that you both have seen coming out of cities in the region?
I remember I was at this Pacific Forum for Sustainable Development. At that time, Australia was participating and they had a lot of bushfires. They actually told some of the Pacific Island countries, in this case Samoa, they're like, we'd really like to learn from you how these community evacuation and networks around disasters and also like urban forestry and vegetation aspects that you've done so well in the Pacific, how we could export that and adapt that to Australia. And the delegate from Samoa almost fell out of his chair. He was like, this is the first time that I've actually had a request from Australia to learn from us. Like, this never happened before. So it's really opened up these kind of new partnerships.
In Malaysia, we would like to see all our cities develop a roadmap. So we do have some very good stories where, for example, we have one in Johor Bahru, which started as just a small community farming, but today every plot of land in that city, they are already planting something because that's their secondary income for them. So we have a lot of small initiatives that have grown because they realize that this can contribute towards a lot more. In fact, now we are even relating the SDGs to the ESGs, making sure that the private companies are also contributing towards the city's SDGs goals. In Kuala Lumpur, we have the KLCC Convention Center. They have brought in all the partners around them because they realized that they hosted World Urban Forum 9. And today, what came out of it is that they have 9 common agenda together. Small efforts that, if done together, would be very big impact to the Kuala Lumpur city. I think this is where it becomes very powerful when they understand that actually they also can participate.
The VLR kind of brings all of that data together. And from the mayors and governors that I've spoken to, they said it's so great to have that VLR report because it helps in their decision making, because finally all this information and data on the economy, society, the environment of the city, it's in one place. So it really helps with that kind of integrated decision making. VLRs and SDG localization work more broadly beyond the reporting is really taking us where investments in reducing traffic congestion, for example, are not just about increasing productivity, but they're also about improving health and improving air quality. It's about looking at how those investments can target multiple different outcomes. And for that, the data piece is so critical.
Omar, you actually mentioned about the voluntary local review of VLRs, and I'm pretty sure a number of our listeners who are from the general public or outside of the field might not be aware what is a VLR. So maybe could you break it down a little?
Essentially, they are an ex post sort of review of progress of the SDGs for a specific city, municipality, or could also be a province. They go beyond just an assessment of progress, but are really about being action oriented in terms of having specific plans, project concepts for cities and local governments to be able to catch up on SDGs where they may be regressing, for example. ESCAP was the first regional commission in partnership with the Penang Platform on Sustainable Urbanization, which Madam Norliza chairs, to develop regional guidelines on voluntary local reviews that came out in 2020. We also promote multi-level governance approach with the VLRs and that kind of vertical integration with the voluntary national review reports, because we know that localizing SDGs is not going to happen alone by just empowering cities, but we need also all levels of government to be supportive of that enabling environment. One of the things that we try to promote also in the VLRs is the use of foresight and futures thinking, because we don't want cities to be stuck in one point in time. Brings all of the stakeholders together in the city. So it's not just about local governments, but it's about private sector, grassroots communities, and neighboring municipalities joining in that effort as well, along with having that enabling environment from the national government.
The cities need to continue to learn from one another. And we have established an SDG Cities Network in Malaysia because we want them to have mentors, mentees along the way so that they can go forward. We're trying to establish now a platform where we can share best case studies. So I think that's very important because cities, they need to be continuously encouraged. They need to continuously be confident that they are doing the correct thing. And I think learning from one another is one of the best things. In the early days of the VLR in the HLPF, there was a lot of openings for cities to come and share. But of late, we see that those opportunities are getting less and less. Of course, we have the local and regional forum at the HLPF, but I find that they are still very much national reporting. I just felt that them knowing that their report is being shared globally will give them the excitement and also give them the confidence that we are doing something right and we are sharing it with the global community.
I think that's an excellent point, Madam Norliza. And to that, ESCAP, along with partners, we will be launching a new SDG localization platform. And that new platform, we hope, will do exactly that, provide a dedicated, enhanced, and highly visible space for cities of all kinds to share their case studies, their successes, their their triumph, their challenges, and identify their opportunities to work with other cities and other partners to overcome them. Platform will have many different offers for cities, from technical assistance to policy briefs to capacity building programs, but also connecting them to a network of different regional partners. I hope that we can get a lot of those smaller towns and cities also engaged in this, because often in these fora, we hear about the big metros, tier one cities experience, but actually in Asia Pacific, so much of the urban growth is going to be happening in those tier two, tier three cities, those intermediate cities. And so if we can put them onto a path that is focused towards the SDGs and sustainability, I think it will have global implications.
Before we wrap up, what would you like our listeners to take away from today's conversation?
I always say that it's how we celebrate the small wins are more important. And I think this is where the SDGs is everyone's responsibility. Civic actions are very, very important. Not about the government role. It's also about how all of us actually as individuals understand, what is our role towards the sustainability pathway. We ourselves take the first step to make those changes. And organizations like Urbanice or ESCAP, we are facilitators, we can guide, we can provide the technical assistance, but at the end of the day, there must be that shared responsibility and that collaboration for us to work together to move forward. I think we have good, solid policies already everywhere. We just need to go into action and implementation.
It's well said, Norliza. Omar?
Sustainable urbanization doesn't have to be an oxymoron anymore in our region. Let's use urbanization as a tool for sustainable development, and that brings together all territories, all peoples. I really believe that this 2030 agenda for sustainable development, it applies to all levels of government and all actors in society. It's really just for everyone, and to think about implementation from the beginning, because that's only how we're actually going to achieve these 17 ambitious goals for the Asia Pacific, but also for the world.
It really is about getting everyone involved at every level, at every stage. So thank you, Norliza. Thank you, Omar. That's all for today's episode of A Region of Solutions. Don't forget to follow us on social media and subscribe to our podcast for more inspiring stories from ESCAP. Until next time, stay curious, stay engaged, and be part of the solution for our region. Have a great week, everyone.